Alright, so we begin in 1925 with a gentleman named Victor Lustig, a man possessed of so much cheek that he managed to sell the Eiffel Tower. Not a miniature souvenir keychain version, mind you, the actual 10,000-ton iron monument that's in the middle of Paris. You see, Paris was having a bit of a rough time maintaining it, and Victor read a newspaper article complaining about the cost. Normal people would read that and move on with the day. Victor read it and thought, splendid, I'll sell it to a scrap dealer. He forged government stationery, invited the city's top salvage merchants to a fancy hotel and told them the tower was being demolished because the city was simply on its arse, absolutely skint, scraping the bottom of the barrel. He was so convincing, one poor bloke paid him a massive bribe just to secure this contract. Victor took the cash, hopped on a train to Vienna and waited and watched on the news. The best part? The dealer was far too embarrassed to tell police he'd accidentally bought a national landmark. So Victor came back a month later and repeated the process, sold it to somebody else. Absolute masterclass in recycling, that one. Efficiency at its finest. Alright, next we move to the 1820s to meet a Scottish soldier named Gregor MacGregor. What a name. A man who possessed such an astronomical amount of audacity, he managed to sell an entire country that didn't even exist. He literally just made it up. So Gregor returned to London from South America and told wealthy British investors that he had been made the prince of a tropical paradise called Poyais. He claimed it had a booming capital city, fertile soil, and rivers flowing with actual gold. You know, standard Tuesday afternoon chat, really. He didn't just tell her a little lie at the pub though, did he? He went full business director. He printed an official guidebook, created fake banking systems, and even convinced hundreds of people to exchange their real British pounds for fake Poyais currency that he'd printed in a damp basement. In 1822, 2 full ships of eager British settlers set sail, dreaming of their new tropical estates. Spoiler alert, when they arrived at the Mosquito Coast in Honduras, there was no capital city, there was no gold, it was literally just a desolate, malaria-infested swamp. But hey, at least they brought their fancy top hats to wear while catching yellow fever. Gregor, meanwhile, stayed behind in London, calmly counting all his cash. When the news broke, he didn't even bother going into hiding. He literally just moved to Paris and sold the exact same fake country to the French. Mwah, magnificent. You have to respect the consistency, really. Now we go to Germany in 1920 to meet a young woman named Anna Anderson, a factory worker from Poland who woke up in hospital one day and decided, you know what, dealing with this standard machinery is tedious. I think today I'm going to be a Russian princess instead. She claimed that she was the Grand Duchess Anastasia, the youngest daughter of the Tsar who had somehow miraculously escaped execution. Now, if I walked into a bank tomorrow and claimed to be the Duke of Westminster, I'd be swiftly escorted out by security and probably given a psychological evaluation. But Anna had so much theatrical presence and sheer unadulterated gall that she managed to fool high society Europeans, actual royal relatives, and wealthy societies for decades. People gave her money, paid for her luxury apartments, and backed her in a massive legal battle to claim the Tsar's multi-million-pound inheritance. Decades after she passed away, scientists finally got round to doing a modern DNA test on her tissue samples, and it turned out she shared exactly 0% DNA with the royal family and was actually just a missing factory hand with a severe talent for acting. I mean, you've got to admire it, really. She managed to retire from factory work and live like royalty for 60 years. Exemplary career planning. Alright, let's head over to New York City in the early 1900s to meet George C. Parker. Finally, a normal name. See, George looked at the city's massive public infrastructure projects and thought, brilliant, I'll sell those as well. His absolute favourite target was the Brooklyn Bridge. He would wander around the harbour looking for wealthy, gullible tourists who had just arrived in America with pockets full of cash. He'd strike up a conversation, pretend to be the owner of the bridge, and convince them that they could make an absolute fortune by buying it off him and setting up their own private toll booth. He was so deeply convincing that he reportedly sold the Brooklyn Bridge twice a week, every week, for years. He'd charge anywhere from $50 to several £1,000s, depending how thoroughly thick the tourist looked. He didn't stop there either. He also sold the Statue of Liberty and Grant's tomb. He was eventually given a life sentence in prison, where I can only assume he immediately tried to sell the wood on his own cell door. Absolute visionary. And finally, we conclude in the early 2000s with a young gentleman named Rudy Kurniawan, a man who realized that if you want to steal millions from the ultra-wealthy, you don't need a weapon, you just need a funnel, some cheap supermarket plunk, and a total lack of morals. See, Rudy burst onto the luxury wine scene as a premier collector. But Rudy had a little secret. He wasn't sourcing these legendary wines from underground French cellars. He was making them in his kitchen sink in Los Angeles. He would literally mix cheap £10 California red wine with a bit of everyday Bordeaux. Pour it into empty luxury bottles he'd found in the bin, and slap on a fake artificially aged labels he'd printed at home. He sold these kitchen sink cocktails at high-end auctions for tens of thousands of pounds a bottle. The multi-millionaire experts drank them, smacked their lips, talking about, earthy notes, the historical complexity. He made tens of millions of dollars before an expert finally noticed a typo on one of his homemade labels, defeated by a calendar date. It turns out a sophisticated palate can be easily fooled by a fancy font and a posh attitude. Simply magnificent. Absolute poetry. 5 moments in history where someone realized that human greed is a beautiful thing to exploit, whether it's selling the Eiffel Tower twice or making millions from a bucket of cheap booze in your kitchen. Just goes to show, if a deal looks too good to be true, you're probably about to fund somebody's holiday in Vienna. If you want to see me explain more ridiculous moments, feel free to subscribe. It helps the channel grow, and unlike a plot of land in Poyais, it actually exists. Until next time, guard your wallet, yeah? Cheerio.